Hey folks, how you doing? Thought I'd contribute a lick to Anita's lick library. I think it's a cool idea, and hopefully I can help kickstart it a little bit. Thought I'd demonstrate a 251 for you that I picked off of a Blue Mitchell solo that I recently transcribed on a tune called Stablemates. And if you want to check out that full transcription, it's in the transcription section in the campus. And thought I'd talk about it a little bit and analyze it, break it down for you. Yeah, so it's a lovely phrase. It's not super exotic as far as inside. Playing with a lot of notes outside the key and a lot of tension. It's a pretty inside lick. It's mostly chord tones. There are a couple of passing notes, chromatic passing notes, but it's just a super smart, melodic, beautiful 251 that I really latched onto and I loved. And it's a good example of how transcription functions for me anyway. Even though I transcribe the full solo, whenever I transcribe, there's generally a few phrases that will stick out to me that I'll fall in love with and dig, and I'll extract them and then try and incorporate them into my own playing, simulate them as language. And this is a lick that, I immediately was like, yeah, it's a killer, killer 251, and I've already, it's already come out a few times in my playing recently. So cool. So in the original lick, it's a 251 in D flat, and it's down here on the neck. I'm gonna notate it and show it to you in the key of F, just to get it up on the neck and be in a key that has less flats. And moving it up the neck will make it easier to play, to facilitate it a little bit, because can be a little bit of a technically challenging lick. There's some stretches in it, and the fingering that I'm going to use is really just chosen for the purposes of phrasing, to make the lick sound good and simulate that beautiful trumpet phrasing, which doesn't necessarily come naturally on the bass, and that's one of the things I really dig about transcribing horn stuff and instruments that aren't bass. It just kind of allows me to think about approaching the phrasing on the bass in a different way, like a horn player would phrase, which is really cool. So the fingering I've chosen is not to make it extra difficult to play, it's to make it sound good. Okay, so let me play the lick, and you'll notice in the notation there's a pickup measure. Okay, that says D7 in parentheses, which is the 5 of 2. Okay, D7 is the 5/7 chord of the 2 minor chord. Okay, it's a secondary dominant, D7. It's the 6th chord in the key, and it's treated as a dominant 7th to lead nicely to the G minor. Okay, oh, turn up my bass. Sorry. Okay, so if you have a backing track that's a 2-5-1-6 in F major 7, you could loop this lick round and around, and it'll sound really cool. So so those first few notes are over the D, and they're a pickup to the lick, and really the lick starts on right there over the G minor 7, which is the major 6th of G minor 7, and that's kind of not as common of a note to target over the 2 minor chord. Usually in a 2-5-1, a cliche thing to do is to wait until that 2 chord goes to the 5 chord to target that note, because that note, the 6th of G minor 7, right, which is E, is the major 3rd of the 5/7 chord, C. So most 2-5-1s you hear, will target that, on the 5 chord, but Blue targets it right away. And I think what's happening is, and this is a common approach that a lot of players use, is he's not even thinking about the 2 chord. He's thinking about both measures as being all C7, okay? And he's simplifying his harmonic thinking in a way. And he's also utilizing what's called the bebop scale, okay? And there's various bebop scales, but the most common one is thought of being related to Mixolydian, and that's adding a passing note between the root and the flat 7 in Mixolydian, right? So if you have a C7 chord, here's the root, it's adding that passing note. Right? It's a great device because what it does is it makes the scale become an 8-note scale as opposed to a 7-note scale, which automatically makes the phrasing sound smoother because it puts the chord tones on the strong beats. It's a very popular device in jazz, and you could use it in any form of music. It's really cool. So what I believe Blue is doing and thinking about is he's just thinking about C7 and utilizing the bebop scale. Who knows? But in any event, it's a beautiful lick, and it's a little unconventional to do that. Okay, the next, so that's the note that the lick kind of starts on the G minor. G minor 7, okay? And then it does this phrase. And that's where I'm talking about the bebop scale. There's a little 16th note, a trill, and that's why I chose this fingering to facilitate that. But you notice right here, that's that chromatic passing tone I'm talking about. Okay? And then what happens right after that is he plays a D minor triad. Okay, we're still over G minor here, and that's really a cool thing to do. I use that quite a bit. Whenever you have a 2 minor 7 chord or a minor 7th chord period, you can play a minor triad up a 5th, and what happens is it gives you the 5th, the flat 7th, and the 9th of the chord. So it's a real easy way to generate an upper tension sound, but you're only thinking about a simple triad. Very common device and really useful. Hear that? Cool. So then, what happens is that note A is where it goes to the 5 chord, and A, not only is it the same note that the lick started on, it happens to be the 13th, or again, the 6th, if you want to think of it that way, of C7. So again, he's targeting that 6th, that 13th. Right there is where the C7 happens at. So that's very cool. It's beautiful. It's not, it's a less common note to target when, in a 2-5-1 lick that outlines the changes. So I love it. It just right away I was like, wow, that's a beautiful phrase. So yeah, so the rest of the lick, there's that rhythm again, that 16th note rhythm, targeting the major third of the C7 chord, and then it just climbs up the scale to the major third of the F major 7, and then it ends on a little by playing the 5th and playing the 6th. That's a common way to end a jazz phrase, and I would recommend that when trying to make something like this your own, experiment with ways of getting into the lick, and experiment with phrases at the end of the lick, because oftentimes what happens when we learn these 2-5-1s from books and stuff, really nothing happens before and nothing happens after, and when you try and apply it to your playing, it can sound clinical and not smooth and improvisational if you don't play something that leads into it that makes sense, and something after it really is huge, that makes sense. A lot of times we'll learn a lick and we'll go, and that's it. You know, we won't have anything after that. So it's good to have some ending phrases. So one is just landing on the fifth, or to the you know, the 13th, the 6th. A major triad up a fifth from the root of the one chord is also a great thing to play as an ending phrase. So in this case, it would be a G major triad. I'm sorry, a C major triad over F, which gives you the 5th, the major 7th, and the 9th. Another example of superimposing a triad to get an upper structure sound. So you might, you know, you could do something like this. Okay, the point is, you know, you want to try and assimilate it as language and make it your own. So that's the lick. And again, the fingering is just to facilitate the phrasing, the hammer-ons, the pull-offs, the slurs, the slides. And sort of, you know, simulate that trumpet phrasing again. All right, cool, man. Hope you guys like that lick. I love it. I'll play it for you here over 251 and F backing track. And yeah, cool. Keep plucking, y'all. All right. Peace.